Right now, we are closing in on a sacred season of reflection. It arrives, though, with added precautions. We'll examine how security is being stepped up ahead of next week's high holy days. Also, from free checkups to a 5K and some star power, South Fulton is making wellness a community celebration. And find out what's behind this inaugural celebration of good health. They are popping up everywhere from small towns to city streets. We'll go round and round and round the issues of roundabouts and find out how these traffic circles may be changing the way Georgia drives. This is The Take. Hello and welcome. I'm Cheryl Preheim in today for my friend Chessie McNeil. This is The Take, where we go behind the headlines. We look at why and how stories are impacting your community. Experts share what they know, and we always have a little fun too. But let's start today with your money.
With today's decision, we remain well positioned to respond in a timely way to potential economic developments. We will continue to determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Jerome Powell announcing earlier this week the Fed Reserve's first rate cut since last year. The Federal Reserve lowered rates by a quarter point, the first cut that we have seen since December of last year. So that puts the benchmark federal funds rate in a new target range between 4 and 4.25%, down from the previous level. And officials signal that we could see as many as 2 more cuts before the end of the year if the economic data supports it. Lower borrowing costs could help families with mortgages, car loans, credit cards. But will it be enough to offset inflation? Let's get some perspective now with Sina Galara, Assistant Professor of Supply Chain Management at Georgia State's Robinson College of Business. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much. Excited to be here.
So is this rate cut more about maybe helping the economy grow or about calming nerves over a slowing job market?
It's generally a reaction to the labor market. Essentially, the Federal Reserve was trying to resist rate cuts because they had a lot of worries about inflation. Especially after tariffs, they have repeatedly said that we worry that these tariffs might reignite inflation, and so that could get out of hand. And they were putting a lot of weight on that. But over time, they realized that the labor market is deteriorating, and so it got to a point where it got really worrying for them, and they had to react and reduce the rate.
Yeah, we're just starting to get more data about the impact of tariffs. For everyday people, money's pretty tight for most folks. How quickly might this cut show up in things like mortgages, credit cards, or car loans?
I would say it already has, because the market has been predicting this rate cut right after we got the labor data in the last 2 months. So the 10-year yield has been coming down, which is a benchmark for mortgage rates. If the Fed keeps cutting rates, we should see that trend continue, because that reduces the borrowing cost for banks. Then banks would be able to offer mortgages at cheaper rates. And so that could be one effect. However, we have to be cautious. If inflation surges again, we have to go through a period of mortgage rates going back up temporarily.
Yeah, it's always a balancing act. So on the flip side, if somebody has money to save, what does it mean for people with CDs or high yield savings account? That lower rate could impact that as well.
Yeah, so generally when these rates are dropped, the interest that different institutions pay on cash or other financial assets also slightly goes down, although 25 basis points is not a substantial amount that would affect personal finance decisions by a large amount. However, yes, if keep reducing this rate, the interest on those things may also go down. So then one has to evaluate, do I still want to allocate as much as before? to these interest products or move money around a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you always get the question, so what happens next? 2 more rate cuts have been announced between now and the end of the year, but do you see anything which could change that potentially?
Yes. So basically the Fed is trying to balance employment and inflation, right? So if they stimulate the economy too much, that's going to help employment, but then it will also cause a resurgence of inflation. If they don't stimulate enough, the labor market will keep weakening, and that's a very bad outcome for everybody, including the more vulnerable populations. That would be the first people who are impacted. Mm-hmm. So the Fed has to strike this balance, and they look at the data. So they're going to look at the data month after month. If inflation rises again, they'll have to slow down. They will definitely slow down their rate cut path. However, if you get bad employment reports, they would potentially accelerate the plans for the rate cuts.
Yeah, inflation is really what hits people on those everyday items that are essential in our lives. So I'm curious, from your perspective, bottom line, should families and businesses see this as a turning point or maybe starting to turn the corner, or just a cautious first step by the Fed with really a wait and see mentality?
I think this does paint a picture of the Fed changing direction. They have been keeping the rate at a high level by their own analysis. They because of inflation, they went to a level for the rates that they consider to be tight. Now, so they never planned to keep it tight as much as they did. And so they would naturally, the moment they feel more comfortable with inflation, they would naturally want to bring that down. So we are looking at meaningful reduction of the rate. The Fed governor's own prediction on the Summary of Economic Projection report also shows they're planning several rate cuts in the future. And so if we don't get a surprise on inflation, they should be slowly reducing this rates to more neutral level. And the neutral level is not something they're very clear on, but they basically, again, look at the balance of the labor and inflation.
Yeah.
And so that's the plan, but it all depends because the economy is very dynamic.
Sure.
We still haven't seen everything we should have seen about tariffs. Tariffs have caused less inflation effects, fortunately, than predicted, but we are yet to see the end of it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next. There's so much to consider, and I know it's always changing. Sina Galara, thanks so much. We always appreciate your insight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, we've got a lot more for you coming up on The Take. We'll be right back. President Trump back at the White House today after a 2-day state visit in the UK, and his attention has quickly shifted back to stateside issues. NBC's Alice Barr joining us now from outside Buckingham Palace in London. Alice, the president talked with the press aboard Air Force One. He dove right into the debate over Jimmy Kimmel being dropped by ABC.
He did. You know, he had a busy week, a busy couple of days here in the UK, but he was not taking a breath. He made more headlines on Air Force One on the way home. And what he said opens this free speech debate up even more, because he made the comment that he believes that the networks are against him. He said those that give him all bad press, bad publicity, should potentially lose their licenses. He said, though, that would be up to the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr. That name may sound familiar because that's the same person who made those comments about ABC late night host Jimmy Kimmel and hinted at potential action. Just the network then pulled that show indefinitely off of the air. And so that's raising questions about how direct, you know, that link was. And the president then commenting that maybe there could be similar action in other cases. And of course, that was all involving comments that Jimmy Kimmel made during his Monday night monologue regarding now debunked statements that the murderer in the Charlie Kirk shooting was somehow tied to the MAGA movement, and also suggesting that Republicans were trying trying to score political points off of the assassination. And that is all really just making this free speech debate broil on both sides of the Atlantic. Interestingly, I heard a lot about it here in the UK as well.
Yeah, you've been there in the UK covering the president's visit. He covered a lot of ground with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Yeah, they had a press conference side by side yesterday where they spoke about this free speech issue, spoke about Jimmy Kimmel up there together, which was interesting to see. And then they also were asked about the war in Gaza, where there's some differing opinions, with the UK preparing to recognize a Palestinian state amid the intensifying Israeli military offensive, and President Trump saying he does not agree with that. He thinks it might somehow reward Hamas. And then there was also a moment where Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the UK kind of nudged President Trump to try to urge him to be a little tougher on Russian President Putin to end the assault on Ukraine. They also spoke about trade and kind of leaning into business ties to strengthen this relationship at, a fraught time in terms of a lot of complex issues.
And then now also a call today with the president of China. He and President Trump had a conversation. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so that call began at 8 a.m. Eastern time. We're waiting for kind of an update on the wrap of it. They were going to talk about trade and also critically about this TikTok deal that we've been hearing on and off about for so long. The president and many here in the U.S. want to see TikTok sold to an American ownership group to have it continue rather than being under Chinese leadership. So there was meant to be a discussion to finalize a deal on that would then ensure that incredibly popular social media platform TikTok could remain available for the millions and millions and millions of American users that so love it.
All right. Alice Barr, thank you so much for the updates. Sounds like we'll get a lot more information here in the next couple of hours. Appreciate your coverage there from the UK. This is The Take, and we've got a lot more for you on the other side of the break. This weekend marks the start of the Jewish High Holy Days, a time of reflection and renewal, but also one of heightened concern. With gatherings across Metro Atlanta, synagogues are stepping up security, from patrols to bag checks, to keep worshipers safe. Let's talk about what it means for the community with Brian Davis, Community Security Director for Jewish Atlanta. Thanks for the time.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Let's start with some information, maybe for those viewers who are not of the Jewish faith. Describe the importance of these high holy days.
Sure. So this is a time where families will gather to reflect and celebrate the high holy days, and it lasts, roughly over a week. But our synagogues and our facilities will be full of people coming in to celebrate and reflect and, enjoy a time of worship and gathering.
How do Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur differ in their themes and their traditions, and how do they connect as well?
So I know we're bringing in the new year now, and some of the differences, with this is at some point people gather in their homes, so it's more of a personal celebration with family and friends. Other times they'll gather in the synagogues, and as I said before, people that maybe are not coming on a weekly basis will come and celebrate at this time of year. So our synagogues really will just be full of people reflecting and celebrating this time of year.
And that's part of the reason security is a focus here. When you look at the security picture today compared to just a couple of years ago, what stands out most to you?
Of course, after the attacks of Hamas on October 7th, we have really had to pick up our vigilance around all of our facilities, all of our organizations, to just make sure everybody's following their policies and procedures, that they have plans in place to stay safe. We've really picked up training our staff members and congregants even of what to do in a emergency situation. But probably the one thing that we've concentrated on more is really working with our law enforcement partners. So our state, federal, local law enforcement partners, we make sure that we're really sharing information. Secured Community Network has a 24/7 intelligence desk that gathers information, not just here in America, but around the world, to make sure that we're following all anti-Semitic behavior incidences, and we're trying to really combat anti-Semitism.
How do you balance the need for strong security, but also keep the services welcoming and spiritually open?
That's always the biggest question, and one thing that we really work with each organization sort of on a personal basis, kind of a one-on-one, where we try to make sure that they feel good, that they have balanced that welcoming stance, that welcoming feeling when you come in, that you're being greeted. But I think people these days really want to feel secure also. All of our facilities have off-duty police officers working, or professional security personnel working on the campuses. And I think people have come to expect that type of security, and it makes them feel safer when they're gathering in a place where security is not only on the exterior but interior, and that your facility has taken their responsibility to keep you safe very seriously, and they've really worked on it year round.
Yeah, these are conversations that we're having in places maybe a lot of people thought we shouldn't have to have them in, places of worship, in schools, and so on. As we look ahead, what message do you hope both the Jewish community and the wider Atlanta community take away from the High Holy Day seasons about faith, resilience, and coming together in a time that calls for both reflection, but as you're pointing out, also vigilance?
Yes, one thing you said, I just hope people really look at this, that we are resilient, that people are prepared, that our facilities are prepared, and that they can come and feel empowered, that they're coming to a safe facility, that they can bring their families to a safe facility, and that people, not just the facility, but local, state, federal law enforcement are really keeping an eye on the situation, and they're standing with us to make sure people are safe during this time of year.
All right, well, we appreciate the time, and we hope for a very safe season. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, this is The Take. We've got a little more for you coming up in just a bit. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Some drivers like them, some are confused, and there are drivers who groan when they see one coming. Roundabouts, you're seeing more of them on Georgia's roads, and for good reason. It's National Roundabouts Week, and it turns out those circles could be saving lives, money, and time. GDOT logs at least 175 roundabouts currently in use across the state, with 50 more under construction, more than 200 in development. The U.S. Department of Transportation says roundabouts reduce fatal and serious injury crashes by up to 82%. That's compared to conventional intersections with stop signs or signals. Time to go round and round as we do every Friday with GDOT spokesperson Natalie Dale. Happy Friday, great to see you.
Happy Friday. That was the perfect lead-in. You know, sometimes we celebrate the heroes of our roads, our maintenance crews, our literal hero operators, champ operators. This week we've been celebrating an engineering design that has been around since at least the medieval times, that brings, it's the traffic design hero of our world. So yes, we've been celebrating not international, but National Roundabout Week this week.
We should make it international. They are in other, a lot of countries use them. So you're talking about an engineering feat that can be heroic. So what do you think is the biggest misconception for drivers, the ones who say, oh, it's not for me, I don't get it?
Well, I think that the average motorist who hasn't used a roundabout thinks that they're inefficient, that they're not going to get through as quickly, and it's really wrong. And so we want to put some of those thoughts to rest by educating about roundabouts. Roundabouts do so many things, so let's get started. Number one, they cut down on fatalities, serious crashes, even fender benders, because you are taking out a plethora of conflict points. Think about your average intersection. You've got T-bone crashes, you've got head-on crashes that happen, and these are the most dangerous crashes we see on our roadways. So when you're going around, we've cut out those conflict points. Roundabouts are also good for pedestrians. You can get some great pedestrian accommodations through roundabouts. They're good for the environment. When you don't have a stack of cars sitting at a red light waiting to get through, because in a roundabout there's kind of continual movement, you don't have idling cars as much as you would have at a standard intersection. So good for the environment, good for safety, good for pedestrians, keeps you moving through. So I'm a big proponent of roundabouts.
I love that phrase you're using about conflict points. I think any driver in Metro Atlanta wants to reduce conflict points in all kinds of different ways, but change is hard. This is a terrible pun, I don't mean it like this, but the learning curve is maybe some of the issue here. What do you hear from folks where roundabouts were installed, you know, just taking a little time to maybe warm up to them?
Well, again, apprehension becomes excitement after they begin to use it. The crashes go down. We actually just won an award recently at the Southeast Transportation Conference, where we won an award for our I-20 at Maynard Terrace. We put in a roundabout there. There's a school there. There's businesses. There's residential. There was a lot of pedestrian movements. So we looked to see how we could reduce crashes. Put in an amazing roundabout there that has reduced crashes. Pedestrians are able to get where they're going. So they're not just great, they're award winning. You know, there's one right by your station.
There is.
That carries great traffic through that used to back up at that intersection all the time. So we find that once people get comfortable, get to use them, that they're really excited about it. It's just, like you said, the learning curve. I like to think of National Lampoon's European Vacation, where he's going around, Big Ben Parliament, Big Ben Parliament. If you don't know how to get out of one, it can be frustrating. But once you learn how to use it properly, you really do see the benefits.
Okay, walk us all through it. But I have to, in full transparency, I have a 15-year-old who's learning, and we have very funny conversations about this. So remind our audience, how do you handle driving through that roundabout? What's the guidance?
So you really want to know where your entrance and exit point is going to be. So if you are going to just take sort of a little bit of the loop and get off, you want to stay in that outside lane. If you're kind of going all the way around about, you do want to safely, watching traffic, pull to the inside because you kind of have a faster track to where you're going. You just really need to be aware of the cars around you. So again, if you have sort of an immediate exit in that roundabout, stay on that outside lane. If you're going to go around, safely pull to that inside lane, get to where you're going, make sure there isn't a car in your blind spot, and then you pull out. But again, it's that continual movement where you don't have T-bone crashes, you don't have head-on crashes. The speed limit, and you'll love this as a mom of a driver, the speed limits are lower in roundabouts. So even if there is a fender bender, they're less serious because that speed is down, and we know how dangerous speeds on our roads can be in these crash situations.
Yeah, no doubt. You're speaking to my heart there. The slower the better, especially for our younger drivers. Natalie Dale.
Absolutely.
Always appreciate the time. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Okay, you're watching The Take. We'll be right back.
Republican, and I'm prepared to make the tough decisions. I follow the law and the Constitution, and I'll always do the right thing for Georgia, no matter what.
And with that, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger officially shook up the race to become Georgia's next governor. He is taking his efforts from the ballot box to potentially the governor's mansion. Time to look back on yet another wild week in Georgia politics with 11Alive's Faith Jesse, co-host of the Georgia Vote. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Cheryl. How are you?
We are doing well. I mean, it always makes your head spin any couple of days in politics, and we've got a lot to talk about. We're not even a year out from the midterms, and we're getting these blockbuster moves. How much did Raffensperger's entry into the race really shake things up?
You know, it's so funny, too, because we always say that there's never a slow day in Georgia politics, especially here. I mean, this week, two big moves. But first, let's talk about Raffensperger. This is a guy who people were thinking he was going to run for some type of higher office. He actually hinted at it in an earlier interview this year with my co-host of the Georgia Vote, Zach Merchant. And then this week, it's out. He says that he wants to run for governor. He is, like in his ad, a conservative Republican, but he might not see eye to eye with the entire Georgia GOP, especially those who support Donald Trump. You might remember back in 2020, there was a specific phone call involving Raffensperger that kind of led to this election interference case that's no longer in the hands of Fani Willis. Another big breaking news story this week. But Raffensperger, he's somebody to watch, absolutely shaking up things. Not only are we watching for him, but his opponents in this race are certainly watching to see what moves he makes.
No doubt. Raffensperger and Governor Kemp have had a very close relationship through Kemp's both of his terms.
Right.
So Raffensperger certainly has state recognition, some national recognition too. Does that help him become an immediate front runner in the case?
I wouldn't say that there's any immediate front runners right now, especially because one of the people that he's going for, that is Lieutenant Governor, highly coveted endorsement of President Donald Trump, which so many people wanted, right? But sure. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, he has been a Trump loyalist from the very beginning. Raffensperger knew that he was not going to get that endorsement, mostly because of what we saw in 2020. But I wouldn't say that there's any clear front runner right now. A lot of people would say, of course, it's Burt Jones, but when you get to that primary next spring, a lot could change, and that appetite for whatever President Trump is doing right now, that might not resonate with a lot of Republicans. So you could potentially see some of those votes go with a candidate that's not as closely aligned to Donald Trump.
No doubt, and it's a crowded field, so it'll be interesting to see how the votes land when they're all divided up in so many different categories.
Yeah.
So the other big movement, former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who served with Kemp on his first term as a Republican, now getting into the race as a Democrat.
I know, fireworks, right? Some people, depending on who you ask, it was the worst kept secret, maybe. If you looked over the last 12 months with former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, he had been campaigning for Democrats. He had campaigned for then President Joe Biden, then campaigned for then Vice President Kamala Harris, even speaking on the DNC stage during the Biden part of that run. And just this year, he came out as a Democrat. What he's going to face, though, already from his Democratic opponents, he has had these very conservative values for so many years that he's now going to have to dial back. In an interview this week with Politically Georgia and Greg Bluestein, he kind of said that. He said that, you know what? I made a mistake. He owned up to it. But the question is he going to be able to convince primary voters, primary Democrat voters, that he is being genuine in that? I mean, you look at the lineup of other Democrats here. You have Keisha Lance Bottoms, Mike Thurmond, the former DeKalb CEO, Derek Jackson, Olu Brown, Jason Estevez. So he has a crowded field of candidates that he's going to have to convince that, hey, I'm the right guy for the job here.
Interesting. All right. Before we go, anything else on tap for this Sunday show?
Oh, we always have so much on tap,
have
Cheryl.
So much.
Always. We're also going to be talking about, we've seen a lot of fallout from comments being made about the horrible assassination that we saw of Charlie Kirk. We've seen a lot of people get fired for comments that they've made on social media. So we're going to dive into that in this argument of free speech. We're also going to talk about what I mentioned before, this huge decision by the Georgia Supreme Court to not allow Fani Willis to continue that case against Donald Trump. What's going to happen next here? So a lot to watch.
Yeah. Watch out. Pretty soon it's going to be a 2-hour show. You just wait.
We would love it.
Okay.
Bring it on.
I would love it too. All right. You can watch the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant Sunday morning at 11 right here on 11Alive Plus. This weekend, South Fulton is turning health into a community celebration. Free screenings, a 5K, even a big name award honoree, all part of a push to close health gaps in Black communities. Let's talk about it. More about what's behind the new effort with Natasha Williams-Brown, a member of the South Fulton City Council. Welcome to the show.
Well, good morning and greetings and salutations.
Thank you. This sounds like a fantastic event. What inspired the launch of this concept of community wellness days?
Yes, this is going to be a fantastic event. This event was sparked by conversations with the 100 Black men of South Metro. We had talked about doing a wellness event last year, worked together to put the parameters of it in place, and it has just grown into an amazing community event that includes the Old National Merchants 5K walk run, as well as, our host, former Commissioner Michael Hightower, and the wonderful Grammy-winning recording artist CeeLo Green, who is going to join us to help us celebrate health and wellness here in the city of South Fulton.
I love how you are bringing in so many different community leaders and big-name celebrities, because it is about addressing an important need, specifically health disparities in the Black communities, particularly for Black men.
Yes, particularly for Black men. One of the goals of this event is to screen 500 Black men for prostate cancer. We know that African American men suffer disproportionately from prostate cancer. They die much more frequently, and typically when they catch the disease, it is either stage 3 or stage 4. So we want to bring these resources to the community, provide this opportunity opportunity for Black men to come to a fun, safe, loving, healthy environment, get their screenings, get their blood pressure checked, and get them the resources and the care that they need in the case anything is found, so that we can save lives, but also we can address the healthcare gaps and the inequities in healthcare that we experience here south of I-20.
Before we go, you had mentioned that safe and loving environment. Barriers coming down is so critical, trust being something that is critical. What do you say to people who might be hesitant, maybe fearful about health screenings, in terms of working to build that trust so we can have earlier detection and better outcomes?
I would say this is precisely why we are having this event in the community and not at a hospital, not at a facility. Grown Folks Plaza on Old National Highway is a community hub. Everyone here is familiar with it. It is a place where people come to recreate, to enjoy, to have a great night out. But they are also a wonderful partner with the city of South Fulton. Miss Harriet, the owner of Grown Folks, always makes her establishment available to us for community events. And so it just made sense to work with her, to work with the Old National merchants, to bring the resources to the community where our Black men live, so that they could be comfortable in coming to get the screenings. And we encourage everyone to come out, every man, every woman, every child, every pet, come out and have a good time, but also see about your health.
Yeah, a community event, a family event, a wonderful celebration for a terrific purpose. So we hope it's a tremendous success. We can't wait to follow up. Natasha Williams-Brown, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you for the time. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. And anybody who wants to go, this is happening tomorrow, 7 a.m. until noon. It's in the parking lot of Harold's Chicken and Ice Bar right along Old National Highway, as we've been talking about. So the event is free. And our Jonathan Martin is serving as one of the day's MCs. So be sure and check it out and spread the word to your friends too. A lot more ahead on The Take. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Okay, brace yourselves. Your monthly payments might look a little different soon. And CNN's Maribel Aber joins us now from the NASDAQ market site in New York. Maribel, if you thought the housing market was cooling, this number might heat things up.
It might, Cheryl. Listen, so mortgage rates dropped again this week. On Thursday, Freddie Mac reported the 30-year fixed mortgage rate averaged 6.26% for the week ending September 18th. That's down from 6.35% the previous week. And, you know, it's the fourth straight week of declines as mortgage rates fell ahead of the Federal Reserve's interest rate cut Wednesday. Refinance activity surging. The Mortgage Bankers Association reports applications jumped nearly 60% last week. Here's the thing. Mortgage rates usually track the 10-year Treasury yield, not the Fed's rate directly. So when that yield rises, rates climb, and when it falls, rates ease. Okay, on Thursday, chipmaker NVIDIA said it will take a $5 billion stake in Intel. So that makes NVIDIA one of Intel's largest shareholders alongside the U.S. government. The move comes as Washington invests billions to strengthen domestic chip making and reduce reliance on other countries. Last month, President Trump announced the government was making an $8.9 billion investment in Intel. Trump is trying to boost semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S. and cement America's position as a leader in the chip making industry. Hyundai is recalling more than 500,000 Palisade SUVs over a seatbelt issue. The recall covers model years 2020 through 2025. Hyundai says seatbelt buckles in the driver and the passenger and second row window seats may fail to latch. There have been more than 500 reports of faulty latches, but no crashes, no injuries, no deaths. Dealers will inspect and replace the buckles for free until repairs are made. Hyundai says to firmly insert seatbelts and tug on them to make sure they're secure. Finally, the holidays are still months away. Well, like 97 days till Christmas. But they seem to creep up fast. And if you're not careful, your gift packages can arrive late. The U.S. Postal Service has announced its recommended mailing and shipping dates for the 2025 holiday season. For customers in the lower 48, cards and packages should be sent by December 18th. That's for priority mail. For first class mail and USPS Ground Advantage service, it's December 17th. For priority mail express, it's December 20th. You can find more on the recommended holiday shipping and mailing dates at USPS.com. FedEx.com. Cheryl, I can't procrastinate when I ship. I can't even say it, procrastinate. I have, no joke, 60 packages that I've got to send over the holidays, and shipping is expensive.
It is
and
so
only
expensive.
the ones on the good list get on Maribel's cookie list. And you're there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the lighter the package, the easier it is to ship and cheaper. So, just be strategic. Feathers for everyone this year. Maribel, thank you so much.
Yes.
All right, don't go anywhere. The take continues on the other side of the break. This is something parents, aunties, uncles, grandparents think a lot about, and we talk a lot about kids' mental health, but the numbers show just how common these struggles really are and why parents can't afford to miss the warning signs. The CDC says about 1 in 5 U.S. children ages 3 to 17 have been diagnosed with a mental, emotional, or behavioral health condition. Breaking that down, roughly 11% live with anxiety, 8% with a behavior disorder, and 4% depression. But here's the challenge. Only 20% of children with mental, emotional, or behavioral disorders ever receive any kind of care from a specialized provider. So we wanted to get some context and analysis on this important conversation. Dr. Stephen Palte, Chief Medical Officer for United Healthcare of Georgia, thank you for coming on. I know this is a very important topic. So start with, why do parents and children so often have such different perspectives on a child's mental health?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Well, I think, obviously the children see things differently to the parents, and often, the children can feel that they are being pressured by the parents to conform to certain schedules, and that can lead to a lot of friction. So it's really important that that parents listen to their children, meet them where they are, really try and understand what's going through their minds, and try and come to a compromise to try and help them. And obviously, if that is not if that is not successful, then obviously there are resources, lots of resources, starting with the pediatrician or primary care physician, who can really help guide the parents and the child to the necessary care.
So what are some of the early warning signs that parents should really be keyed in on, especially ones that might be really easy to miss?
Well, certainly any kind of behavioral changes, if your child is starting to be a little bit more withdrawn or starting to act out, and that's not really normal for them, that's certainly something to think about. Also, if you notice that at school that the schoolwork seems to be dropping off a little bit, or they don't want to participate in sports, or they're not doing their homework, those can all be signs that there is some underlying behavioral health issue.
I think a lot of parents probably want to talk to their kids but struggle to get that conversation going. Maybe when they do, a child might say, hey, you don't understand. How can parents respond in a way, or even initiate a conversation that keeps the door open and really gets the ball rolling into a productive conversation that could lead to some help down the road?
Well, really listening, a lot of time parents, as I say, tend to have their own ideas, but just sitting down with with the child, and, just having an open forum, having an open mind, and saying, that it's a safe space, that you're going to try and discuss and work through these issues, and if necessary, seek professional advice to try and overcome the problem. Another good avenue is, if there is issues at school that could be affecting this, speaking to the teachers and the counselors at the school can also help, and they can also give very good guidance.
Oh, that's a great point. Kind of bringing that team around a child can be helpful. From your perspective, what do you think is the biggest barrier to early detection? Because if you can talk early and get support early, it doesn't have to progress so much. Do you think it's awareness, stigma, access to care?
Well, certainly stigma is one thing, but I think awareness is a very big issue. We're all busy in our lives, and as parents, we have our jobs, and we're trying to take care of the household, and sometimes we tend to just not be aware that there's an issue. There may be some mild behavioral changes that may go unnoticed, or some change in behavior, change in schoolwork. There is obviously a stigma, but I think that is improving. And it's very important that when children go for their primary care visit and their checkups, that this is something that is addressed by the physician, and make it a safe space for the child to talk and open up. Sometimes if for the teenagers, it's often that the parents are asked to leave the room so that the child can really be honest with the provider to try and get the necessary assistance.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you also just talk about the speed and the busyness of our lives, not just as adults, but especially as kids get a little older in those teenage years. It can feel like ships passing in the night sometimes. So making time for those conversations. How would you say it would be most effective to sort of make this interaction that's so key part of everyday life within, support systems between family members and kids?
Well, I think, schedules are very important. If you have set schedules, especially meal times, having set meal times and having the whole family sit down together, that's often a very good forum that, children and the parents can sort of speak freely and have time to discuss some of these issues. As you mentioned, ships passing in the night, we all get so busy that sometimes our kids sort of eat on their own, we eat on our own, and we really don't have that time to sit down and communicate. Communication and those open channels of communication are vital to trying to solve the issue.
Yeah, finding the time whenever someone can, depending on work schedules and school schedules and everything in between. Dr. Stephen Palti, thanks so much for the insight. I know these are conversations that we hope will continue to happen in households all over our community.
Thank you for having me.
All right, this is The Take. More coming up after the break. Let's take a look out the window briefly for a minute over the city. Just a little hazy out there. We do have an air quality alert today. It's day 2 of that, so just keep that in mind. It's going to be warm though, and a good weekend ahead. Midtown hosting Shaky Knees this weekend, so mostly sunny and hot. It's going to be mostly clear, so enjoy it. A lot of great things happening in the city throughout the weekend. Before we go, my final take. We live in a world where everyone feels pressed for time, rushing from one thing to the next, trying to shave just a couple of seconds off your commute. But this may be the ultimate example of what not to do when you are in a hurry. Take a look at this video. It shows a woman with a suitcase actually crawling under this stopped train just to get to the other side. Investigators in Illinois believe she was just racing to make another train to try to get to work on time. She's trying to slide under that train just to save time. Officials say they've seen people try it before, even climbing freight cars, but it's against the law. And obviously it is flat out dangerous. By the way, police don't know yet who this woman is, but they want her story and this video to send a clear message that saving time is never worth your life. And yes, crossing tracks illegally can cost you more than a fine. Rail safety experts say no schedule, no meeting, no train is worth the risk. Yet this moment captures the mindset of so many people. So many of us fall into this, right? Thinking we have to try to beat the clock. We've got to cut corners. Somehow we have to do all these things to stay ahead. It's why the highway can get so crazy to and from work. We live in a culture that pushes us to do more, go faster, squeeze one more thing into our day. But this is a sobering reminder of the risk someone might be willing to take just when that pressure comes on strong. So take a deep breath if you can. Give yourself a moment to just relax and enjoy the weekend.